The morning sun cast a golden glow over Buckingham Palace, its grandeur standing tall against the crisp London sky. Tourists from all corners of the globe milled about, their cameras clicking away as they tried to capture the magic of one of England's most iconic landmarks. Among the throng was Emma Carter, a wide-eyed 24-year-old from Ohio who had dreamed of visiting London ever since she was a child. Today marked her first full day in the city, and nothing could dampen her excitement, not even the chilly breeze that nipped at her cheeks. Emma clutched her phone tightly in one hand and a steaming cup of coffee in the other. She had stopped by a nearby cafe earlier, ordering what the barista called a London fog, a drink she never heard of before but decided to try anyway. It smelled heavenly, with hints of lavender and vanilla swirling through the rich espresso. As she sipped cautiously, her gaze wandered toward the palace gates, where the unmistakable figures of the Queen's royal guards stood like statues carved from history itself. One guard in particular caught her attention. His crimson tunic gleamed under the sunlight, perfectly pressed and immaculate. The towering bearskin hat perched atop his head added an air of authority and tradition, making him seem almost larger than life. This was Captain James Whittaker, though Emma didn't know his name yet. To her, he was simply part of the enchantment of the moment, a living symbol of centuries of British heritage. Emma couldn't resist snapping a few photos. She shuffled closer to the gates, angling her phone just right to frame the scene. But there was something else she wanted, a selfie. Not just any selfie, but one with the stoic guard standing proudly behind her. After all, how many people could say they posed next to a real-life royal guard? Her friends back home would surely be jealous. As she turned slightly, trying to get both herself and the guard in the shot, the crowd around her shifted unpredictably. Someone bumped into her shoulder, jolting her arm. For a split second, panic flashed across her face as she watched the dark liquid slosh dangerously close to the rim of her cup. And then it happened. The inevitable spill. The hot coffee splashed downward, landing squarely on the polished black boots of Captain Whittaker. Time seemed to freeze. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Emma's heart sank. Her cheeks burned red as she realized what she'd done. Everyone knew the rules. The royal guards weren't supposed to move or react, no matter what happened. They were pillars of discipline, embodying unwavering dedication to their duty. But this wasn't just any situation. This was a clumsy tourist spilling coffee on one of them. Would he stay completely still, maintaining his composure as expected? Or would he do something entirely unexpected? The tension in the air was palpable, and every eye was glued to the scene unfolding before them. Little did anyone know, this simple mishap was about to turn into something far more memorable than anyone could have imagined. The moment the coffee hit Captain Whittaker's boots, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Emma froze, her face turning an even deeper shade of red as she stared at the dark splotch spreading across the pristine leather. Her mind raced with panic and embarrassment. What was she supposed to do now? Apologize? Run away? Pretend it didn't happen? Every option felt equally impossible. For a few agonizing seconds, no one moved, not even Captain Whittaker. He remained perfectly still, his posture rigid and unyielding, just as protocol demanded. His rifle rested firmly against his shoulder, and his expression betrayed nothing. To anyone watching, it seemed like he hadn't even noticed the coffee soaking into his boots. But Emma knew better. She had seen the exact spot where her clumsiness had landed, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow personal, like fate itself had conspired to make her the center of attention in the worst possible way. The murmurs around her grew louder. Some people chuckled nervously, while others whispered behind their hands, clearly torn between amusement and disbelief. A few kids giggled openly, pointing at the guard's boots and making exaggerated splashing motions with their fingers. One older woman shook her head disapprovingly, muttering something about respecting tradition. Meanwhile, Emma stood rooted to the spot, clutching her empty coffee cup like it was evidence of a crime she hadn't meant to commit. Then, Out of nowhere, someone shouted, "Oh no, mate, that's gotta sting." The comment broke the tension slightly, drawing scattered laughter from the crowd. Emma glanced around, half expecting someone else to step forward and take responsibility for the spill, or maybe offer some kind of distraction. But everyone seemed content to watch and wait, their eyes glued to the guard, as if anticipating a dramatic reaction. Captain Whittaker, however, remained infuriatingly composed. His chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths, but otherwise, he gave no indication that anything unusual had occurred. It was almost eerie, how statuesque he appeared despite the sticky mess on his boots. Emma wondered if he was secretly fuming beneath his calm exterior, or if years of training had truly erased any trace of emotion. Either way, she couldn't help but feel like the universe was mocking her. Her thoughts were interrupted by another nudge from behind, a reminder that the crowd was growing restless. People were jostling for better views, craning their necks to see what would happen next. Emma took a hesitant step back, partly to avoid being trampled, and partly because she wasn't sure she could handle the weight of so many curious stares. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to think of something, anything, to say. "I'm so sorry," she blurted finally, her voice barely audible over the chatter. She winced at how weak it sounded, like the words themselves were apologizing for being spoken. But Captain Whittaker didn't respond. He didn't even blink. Instead, he continued to stand there, immovable and silent, as though carved from stone. And then, just when Emma thought things couldn't get any more awkward, something extraordinary happened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Captain Whittaker shifted his weight ever so slightly. His rifle dipped a fraction of an inch, and his gaze lowered toward his boots. For the first time since the spill, he acknowledged what had happened, and what came next would leave everyone speechless. As Captain Whittaker's gaze dropped to his boots, the crowd held its breath. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting for some sign of how this unusual situation would unfold. Would he break protocol entirely? Would he scold the clumsy tourist who had just ruined his perfectly polished footwear? Or would he simply return to his rigid stance, pretending nothing had happened at all? The anticipation crackled in the air like static. Emma, still standing frozen a few feet away, felt her stomach twist into knots. She wanted to disappear, maybe sink right into the cobblestones beneath her feet, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the guard. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if he reported her? What if she got banned from Buckingham Palace? These thoughts swirled chaotically as she braced herself for whatever came next. But then, something completely unexpected happened. As Whittaker straightened up slightly and adjusted his grip on his rifle, his lips twitched almost imperceptibly. And then, without warning or permission, he winked. Just once. It was subtle, so quick that someone might have missed it if they weren't paying close attention, but it was unmistakable. A single blink of one eye, accompanied by the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. The effect was instantaneous. Gasps erupted from the crowd, followed by bursts of laughter and applause. Some people clapped their hands over their mouths in shock, while others grinned so wide it looked like their faces might split in two. Even the skeptics who had earlier muttered about respecting tradition couldn't help but chuckle. The tension that had been building since the coffee spill melted away in an instant, replaced by a wave of delight and disbelief. Emma blinked, unsure if she'd imagined the gesture. Had Captain Whittaker really winked at her? She glanced around, half expecting someone to tell her she was seeing things, but the reactions of the crowd confirmed it. He had done it. All eyes were now on her, the unsuspecting tourist who had somehow managed to charm one of the Queen's most disciplined soldiers. For a moment, she forgot her embarrassment and felt a strange mix of pride and amusement bubbling inside her. Meanwhile, Whittaker resumed his formal posture as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. His face returned to its usual stoic expression, his rifle back in position, and his gaze fixed straight ahead. If not for the damp splotch on his boots, No one would have guessed anything unusual had taken place, but the wink lingered in everyone's minds, replaying itself over and over like a scene from a movie. People began whispering excitedly among themselves. "Did you see that?" One man asked his companion, pointing at the guard. "He totally winked." Another woman turned to her friend and said, "I can't believe it. He's human after all." Kids giggled louder than ever, mimicking the wink with exaggerated expressions that made their parents laugh even harder. The entire atmosphere shifted from tense curiosity to lighthearted joy. For Emma, the experience was surreal. One minute, she had been mortified, convinced she'd committed some unforgivable faux pas. The next, she found herself at the center of what felt like a real-life fairy tale, a story she knew she'd be telling for years to come. She couldn't stop smiling, despite the lingering awkwardness of having spilled coffee on a royal guard. Little did she know, this moment was only the beginning. As the crowd buzzed with excitement and phones clicked furiously to capture the aftermath, Emma decided to pull out her own phone and snap a quick photo of the scene. She typed out a caption in her head. "When you spill coffee on royalty and they wink at you." It seemed silly, but also kind of perfect. Without realizing it, she was about to spark something much bigger than herself, a viral sensation that would change both her life and Captain Whittaker's forever. Still buzzing from the unexpected wink, Emma decided to share her surreal experience with the world. She pulled out her phone, opened her social media app, and typed up a quick post. "When you spill coffee on royalty and they wink at you." She added a selfie she'd taken moments earlier, her wide-eyed expression paired perfectly with Captain Whittaker's stoic figure in the background, and hit post. At first, it seemed like just another fun memory captured for her friends and family back home. But within minutes, something extraordinary began to happen. The post started gaining traction almost immediately. Friends from Ohio commented with laughing emojis and messages like, "OMG, only you could pull this off." Strangers who stumbled across the post began sharing it, adding their own witty captions or tagging friends who might enjoy the story. By the time Emma finished exploring the palace grounds and sat down at a nearby cafe for lunch, her notifications were blowing up. Her follower count had skyrocketed, and people from all over the globe were chiming in with comments like, "This is the best thing I've seen all week." And "I need updates, is he single?" It didn't stop there. News outlets picked up the story, turning what had been a lighthearted moment into a full-blown viral sensation. Headlines popped up everywhere. Royal Guard breaks protocol with playful wink. Tourist turns palace mishap into internet gold. And even the day coffee brought royalty to life. Talk shows joked about it during their opening monologues, and late-night hosts created skits imagining how Captain Whittaker must have trained for such a cool under-pressure moment. Memes flooded the internet, with photoshopped images of Whittaker winking alongside celebrities, cartoon characters, and even historical figures like King Henry VI. Back in London, word spread quickly among tourists and locals alike. People flocked to Buckingham Palace, hoping to catch a glimpse of the now-famous guard. Some brought cups of coffee as props, attempting to recreate the infamous spill in playful homage. Others held signs reading, "We love your wink," or shouted jokes like, "Can we get an encore?" The atmosphere around the palace became electric, filled with laughter and good-natured teasing. For once, the usually solemn guards found themselves at the center of a joyous spectacle. Meanwhile, Emma's newfound fame grew beyond anything she could have imagined. Reporters reached out, asking for interviews about her brush with royalty. Morning talk shows invited her to appear as a guest, eager to hear her side of the story. Even local businesses got in on the action. One cafe near the palace offered free drinks to anyone who mentioned Emma's name, while another shop sold T-shirts printed with a cartoon of Whittaker winking beside the slogan, "Spill Proof." But amidst all the chaos, Emma remained grounded. She laughed at the memes, answered questions with humility, and marveled at how one small accident had spiraled into such a massive phenomenon. What struck her most was the overwhelming positivity surrounding the incident. In a world often divided by politics, opinions, and stress, this simple moment of human connection, a clumsy tourist and a disciplined guard sharing a laugh, had brought people together in ways she never expected. As the days passed, the story continued to gain momentum. Social media users began speculating about Captain Whittaker's personality, wondering if he was secretly a prankster or if the wink had been a spur-of-the-moment decision. Fans nicknamed him Winky Whittaker, and hashtags like #RoyalWink and #Coffeegate trended worldwide. It wasn't just about the spill anymore. It was about breaking barriers, finding humor in imperfection, and celebrating the humanity behind traditions that often felt untouchable. For Emma, the whirlwind of attention was both thrilling and humbling. She realized that her accidental encounter with Captain Whittaker had sparked something far greater than viral fame. It had reminded everyone watching that even the smallest moments could leave a lasting impact. And as she scrolled through endless comments and shared laughs with strangers online, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the chaos that had started with a single cup of coffee. The whirlwind of attention surrounding the coffee spill and Captain Whittaker's legendary wink eventually made its way to the inner halls of Buckingham Palace, while the public celebrated the guard's playful gesture as a refreshing break from tradition. Those in charge weren't quite so amused. Back at the barracks, Captain James Whittaker found himself summoned for a private meeting with his commanding officer, a conversation he knew wouldn't be entirely pleasant. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Whittaker stood at attention, his posture as rigid as ever, though his mind replayed the events of that day over and over. His commanding officer, Colonel Harrington, sat behind a polished oak desk, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Whittaker," he began, his tone measured but firm, "you are aware that your actions have drawn significant attention." Whittaker nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." Colonel Harrington leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. "Let me be clear. What you did, winking at a civilian, was not part of protocol. Guards are expected to remain stoic, unyielding, and above all, professional. Your behavior has raised concerns." Whittaker swallowed hard but kept his gaze steady. He understood the gravity of the situation. The Royal Guards were symbols of discipline and tradition, representing centuries of history. Breaking character, even in such a minor way, could undermine their authority. Yet, deep down, he also knew why he'd done it. In that split second, faced with a mortified tourist and a crowd holding its breath, he'd chosen connection over rigidity. It hadn't been planned. It had simply felt right. To Whittaker's surprise, Colonel Harrington didn't launch into a full-blown reprimand. Instead, he paused, tapping his fingers lightly on the desk. "That said," he continued, "the reaction from the public has been unexpected." A hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "People seem to adore you. They're calling you the coolest royal guard ever. Even members of Parliament have mentioned your wink during debates about modernizing the monarchy." Whittaker blinked, caught off guard by the comment. Modernizing the monarchy. He hadn't considered his small act could spark such discussions. Still, he remained silent, letting his superior continue. "You've become something of a symbol," Colonel Harrington admitted. "A reminder that while we honor tradition, we must also adapt to the times. However," he added sharply, leaning forward again, "this does not excuse your breach of conduct. Discipline is not negotiable." With that, Whittaker received an official reprimand, a formal mark on his record for failing to adhere strictly to protocol. But then came the unexpected twist. After dismissing him from the meeting, Colonel Harrington called him back just before he reached the door. "One more thing, Captain," he said, his voice softer now. "While I cannot condone your actions publicly, I will say this privately. Well done. You handled a delicate situation with grace and humor. That takes skill." For the first time since entering the room, Whittaker allowed himself a small, relieved smile. As he walked back to his quarters, he reflected on the strange duality of the moment. On one hand, he had broken the rules, and there would always be consequences for that. On the other hand, his decision to wink had resonated with people in ways no one could have predicted. It wasn't just about bending tradition. It was about showing humanity. And perhaps in some small way, he had helped bridge the gap between the monarchy and the modern world. Over the following days, whispers spread among the other guards. Some teased Whittaker good-naturedly, calling him Winky or asking for autographs, which he politely declined. Others admired his ability to handle scrutiny with dignity. Despite the mixed reactions, one thing was clear. Whittaker's wink had sparked a conversation within the regiment itself. Was it time to reconsider how they interacted with the public? Could they maintain their professionalism while allowing moments of warmth and relatability? As Whittaker returned to his duties, standing tall once again outside Buckingham Palace, he couldn't help but notice the smiles from passers-by. Tourists waved enthusiastically, children giggled when they spotted him, and some even mimicked his infamous wink. For better or worse, he realized, his life, and maybe the role of the Royal Guards, would never be quite the same. Inspired by the overwhelming response to the coffee spill incident, Emma decided to stay in London longer than she had originally planned. Her trip, which was supposed to be a quick 2-week vacation, turned into an extended adventure as she embraced her newfound connection to the city and to Captain Whittaker. Through mutual acquaintances and some clever sleuthing online, she managed to arrange a meeting with him off-duty. It wasn't easy. Royal Guards were notoriously private individuals, but Whittaker seemed intrigued by the idea of sitting down with the woman who had inadvertently made him famous. They met at a quaint little cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of Covent Garden. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with soft jazz playing in the background and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Whittaker arrived dressed casually, jeans, a simple sweater, and no bearskin hat in sight. For Emma, it was strange yet refreshing to see him outside his uniform. Without the regalia, he looked less like a stoic symbol of tradition and more like an ordinary man, approachable, thoughtful, and surprisingly humble. As they settled into their seats, Whittaker broke the ice with a lighthearted joke. "I hope you're not planning to bring any hot drinks this time," he teased, gesturing toward her cup of tea. Emma laughed nervously, relieved that he didn't seem to hold any grudges about the coffee mishap. "Don't worry," she replied. "I've learned my lesson." Their conversation flowed effortlessly after that. They talked about everything: their lives before the viral moment, their families, their passions. Whittaker revealed that photography was one of his greatest hobbies, something he'd kept hidden because it didn't align with the formal image expected of him. He showed Emma some of his work on his phone: stunning shots of London's landmarks, candid moments of pedestrians on busy streets, and breathtaking landscapes captured during his rare days off. His photos told stories, each frame brimming with emotion and detail. Emma was genuinely impressed. "You're incredibly talented," she said, scrolling through the images. "Why don't you share these? People would love them." Whittaker hesitated, explaining how he'd always seen photography as a personal escape rather than something meant for public consumption. "It's nice to have something just for myself," he admitted. "But maybe it's time I let others see it too." Encouraged by Emma's enthusiasm, Whittaker began opening up about other aspects of his life. He confessed that while he took pride in his role as a royal guard, there were moments when he felt constrained by its strict rules. The wink, he explained, hadn't been calculated. It was instinctive, born out of a desire to ease Emma's embarrassment and show kindness in a human way. "Sometimes," he said with a small smile, "tradition needs a little flexibility." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Whittaker met several more times, their bond deepening with each encounter. She introduced him to new experiences: street markets, art galleries, even karaoke nights, which he reluctantly agreed to try, much to her delight. In return, Whittaker shared parts of London she might never have discovered on her own. Hidden gardens, historic pubs, and quiet spots along the Thames where the city felt almost serene. Through their friendship, both grew in unexpected ways. For Emma, spending time with Whittaker gave her a deeper appreciation for British culture and traditions, as well as a newfound confidence in navigating unfamiliar situations. For Whittaker, meeting Emma reignited a sense of curiosity and creativity he thought he'd lost beneath years of discipline. Her encouragement pushed him to consider sharing his photography with the world, a step he wouldn't have taken without her support. By the time Emma prepared to leave London, their accidental meeting had blossomed into a meaningful connection. As they said goodbye outside the palace gates, Whittaker handed her a small gift, a framed photograph of Buckingham Palace at sunrise, signed on the back with a heartfelt note. "Thank you," he said simply, "for reminding me that even the smallest moments can make a big difference." Emma hugged him tightly, feeling grateful for the chaos that had brought them together. Little did either of them know, this friendship would inspire changes far beyond their personal lives, changes that would ripple through the very institution Whittaker served. Inspired by his growing friendship with Emma, and the public's overwhelmingly positive reaction to his wink, Captain Whittaker began quietly challenging some of the outdated traditions within his regiment. He didn't do it laudably or rebelliously. Instead, he introduced small, thoughtful changes that added warmth and humanity to their interactions with the public. These shifts were subtle but meaningful, designed to preserve the dignity of the Royal Guards while making them feel more approachable. One of his first ideas came during a routine ceremony at Buckingham Palace. As usual, the crowd gathered behind barricades, snapping photos and whispering excitedly as the guards stood in their iconic positions. But this time, Whittaker noticed a young boy near the front, no older than 6, holding a toy soldier figurine. The child stared up at him with wide eyes, clearly fascinated. Without breaking protocol entirely, Whittaker gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the boy, and then gently tapped his rifle twice against his boot in what looked like a playful salute. The boy gasped, his face lighting up with delight, and immediately mimicked the gesture with his toy soldier. His parents laughed, capturing the moment on camera, and soon other children in the crowd joined in, waving their hands and giggling. It was a tiny act, hardly noticeable to anyone unfamiliar with the strict rules governing the guards' behavior, but it made a world of difference to those who witnessed it. Word spread quickly among visitors that one of the guards had played with a child, and social media lit up once again with praise for Whittaker's kindness. Encouraged by the response, Whittaker proposed similar adjustments during formal events. For instance, he suggested allowing guards to acknowledge children in the crowd with slight smiles or nods when appropriate. "We're here to represent the monarchy," he argued during a meeting with his superiors, "but we're also here to connect with the people. A little warmth won't diminish our professionalism. It'll enhance it." At first, there was resistance from higher-ups who worried about setting a precedent. However, after several successful ceremonies where these gestures led to increased public engagement and goodwill, attitudes began to shift. Whittaker's influence extended beyond ceremonial duties. Back at the barracks, he encouraged fellow guards to share personal interests outside of work, fostering camaraderie and reminding everyone that they were human beings beneath their uniforms. He even organized informal photo sessions, using his own camera to capture candid moments of his colleagues relaxing during breaks. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere within the regiment softened, creating a sense of unity and shared purpose. Public perception of the Royal Guards began to change as well. People started seeing them not just as stoic figures bound by tradition, but as individuals capable of humor, empathy, and connection. Tourists flocked to Buckingham Palace, hoping for another lighthearted interaction, and many left feeling like they'd experienced something special. Some guards followed Whittaker's lead, incorporating their own small acts of kindness into their routines, whether it was offering directions to lost visitors or simply maintaining eye contact long enough to make someone feel seen. Of course, not everyone approved of these changes. Critics argued that softening the guards' demeanor undermined centuries of tradition and discipline. Yet, supporters, including prominent members of parliament and cultural commentators, countered that adapting to modern expectations didn't mean abandoning history. Instead, it meant finding ways to honor the past while embracing the present. For Whittaker, the most rewarding part of this evolution wasn't the accolades or attention. It was knowing that he had helped bridge a gap between the monarchy and the people it served. By showing that tradition and humanity could coexist, he became known as a reformer, a man who respected the weight of his role while daring to add a touch of heart to it. As months passed, Whittaker's efforts continued to gain traction, proving that even the smallest gestures could leave a lasting impact. And though he remained committed to his duty, he couldn't help but smile whenever he saw a child clutching a toy soldier, or when someone shouted, "Thanks for the wink," across the palace gates. Years after the coffee spill that turned into a global sensation, the story of Captain James Whittaker and Emma Carter remained legendary, a tale often recounted in documentaries, articles, and even school lessons about the evolving role of the British monarchy. The simple act of spilling coffee on a royal guard had sparked a chain reaction that no one could have predicted, leaving an indelible mark on both individuals and institutions. For Captain Whittaker, life took unexpected turns. After serving faithfully for over a decade, he decided it was time to step away from his duties as a royal guard. His decision wasn't made lightly, but he felt ready to explore new paths, one of which was sharing his passion for photography with the world. With Emma's encouragement still echoing in his mind, he launched his first exhibition titled Through the Barricades. The collection featured intimate portraits of Londoners, candid shots of bustling streets, and breathtaking images of historic landmarks captured during quiet moments before dawn. Each photo told a story, blending tradition with modernity, a reflection of Whittaker's own journey. The exhibition was met with rave reviews. Critics praised Whittaker not only for his technical skill, but also for his ability to capture the essence of humanity within rigid structures. One reviewer wrote, "Whittaker doesn't just take pictures, he builds bridges between worlds." His work resonated deeply with audiences, reminding them that behind every uniform or title lies a person with dreams, fears, and passions. The success of the exhibition allowed Whittaker to travel extensively, documenting cultures and communities around the globe. Wherever he went, he carried the same warmth and curiosity that had defined his interactions at Buckingham Palace. As for Emma, returning home to Ohio didn't mean leaving her adventure behind. Inspired by her time in London, she began writing a blog chronicling her travels and reflections on cultural connections. Her posts were filled with humor, heart, and vivid storytelling, qualities that quickly earned her a loyal following. Readers loved hearing about her accidental brush with royalty and how it had opened doors to friendships and experiences she never imagined possible. Eventually, Emma turned her blog into a book titled When Life Spills Coffee, a memoir celebrating life's unpredictable moments and the beauty of embracing imperfection. Though their lives took different directions, Emma and Whittaker stayed in touch, exchanging letters and photos whenever they could. Their friendship became a testament to the power of human connection, transcending boundaries of geography and circumstance. During one of her subsequent visits to London, Emma attended one of Whittaker's exhibitions. They stood side by side, marveling at how far they'd come since that fateful day outside the palace gates. In the years that followed, Whittaker's influence continued to ripple through the Royal Guards Regiment. The small changes he had introduced, like acknowledging children in the crowd or adding subtle gestures of warmth, became standard practice. Guards were trained to balance discipline with approachability, creating a more inclusive experience for visitors. Tourists now left Buckingham Palace not only awestruck by its grandeur, but also touched by the kindness of those who protected it. Meanwhile, the infamous coffee spill lived on as a symbol of breaking barriers and finding joy in unlikely places. It reminded people that even the smallest acts of humanity could create ripples of change, bridging gaps between tradition and modernity, authority and accessibility. For Whittaker and Emma, the incident was more than just a funny memory. It was proof that life's greatest stories often begin with something as ordinary as a cup of coffee. Today, Emma keeps a framed photo of herself and Whittaker on her living room wall, a memento of their meeting at the cafe all those years ago. Beneath it hangs a handwritten note from Whittaker. To Emma, my accidental muse. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best moments are unplanned. And whenever she looks at it, she smiles, knowing that life's most extraordinary adventures often start with the simplest missteps.